06:11 a.m. local time. Open ocean. The sea is gray and flat, almost metallic under the early morning sky. A low ceiling of cloud hangs over the horizon, turning everything into muted shades: steel, water, air, blended into one quiet color palette. In the center of it all, a U.S. aircraft carrier moves forward, with the slow certainty of mass and momentum. The ship's wake is the only loud thing. A long white line ripping through calm water like an argument that doesn't need words. From the flight deck, it feels routine. No dramatic alarms. No frantic motion. Deck crew walk with the practiced pace of people who have already lived through enough tension to know that panic never helps. Parked aircraft sit secured, covers on intakes, tie-down chains taut. The carrier is not looking for trouble. It is simply transiting. And in modern naval competition, that alone is enough to attract attention. Inside the ship, the Combat Information Center runs the morning like it runs every morning. Track the air picture. Track the surface picture. Compare data. Filter noise. Confirm what matters. Consoles glow in blue-green light. Headsets are worn loosely, not because the watch is relaxed, but because discipline is constant. On the air defense displays, most returns are normal. Civilian tracks, distant traffic, predictable routes. The ocean may be wide, but patterns exist. Then the pattern breaks. At 06:13 a.m., two fast-moving air contacts appear on the carrier's air search display. They don't drift in like civilian aircraft. They paint in with speed, high altitude, high closure rate, coming from the north on converging lines. No friendly identification signal. No cooperative transponder behavior that would make them ordinary. The tactical action officer leans closer. The radar operator tags the tracks. Range ticks down. Speed readouts stay high. The display updates faster than a casual observer expects. At sea, distance looks like safety. In the air, it disappears quickly. Within seconds, more returns fill in behind the first 2.4 tracks. Then 6. The track quality increases. Behavior confirms what the system already suspects. These are military aircraft. Not bombers. Not slow patrol planes. Fighters, built to compress time, to force reactions, to turn routine into decision points. No radio call comes in. No routine transit. No courtesy. Just approach geometry. On the bridge, there is no dramatic announcement. Professional crews don't add theater to real events. The officer of the deck maintains the same tone he used 5 minutes ago. But the bridge team's posture shifts. Subtle. Immediate, universal. Eyes go from horizon to displays. Hands hover closer to instruments. A calm ship becomes a focused ship. 8T 06:14 a.m. Identification consolidates through track behavior and profile. Russian fighter jets. Not confirmed by a polite introduction. Confirmed by speed, flight pattern, and signature. Everything that matters when words are absent, they begin to descend. At T, first it's gradual. Then it becomes unmistakable. Altitude drops rapidly, moving from transit to presence. High altitude can be explained away. A descending approach toward a carrier group is different. A descent changes the psychology of the encounter, because it changes the consequences of any mistake. Inside CIC, the watch team converts the approach into math, bearing, altitude, closure rate, projected distance at closest approach. In the military world, intent is rarely confessed. It is inferred from geometry. 8:06:15 a.m., the carrier transmits a hail on International Guard Frequency. Com, clear, professional. Unidentified military aircraft approaching U.S. Navy warships. State your intentions. Maintain safe separation. The radio stays silent. A second hail follows moments later, repeated carefully, leaving no ambiguity. Still no response. The fighters keep descending. On the flight deck, sailors start hearing it. Not as a clear engine sound yet, but as a pressure in the air, that distant rising whine that arrives a second after you see the aircraft. Heads turn upward. No one runs. No one points dramatically. They simply look, because the sky has become part of the battlefield even when nobody wants to admit it. At 06:16 a.m., the first visual confirmation comes through long-range optics. Tiny dark shapes below the cloud base, triangles moving fast, growing rapidly, angling toward the strike group's forward sector, where a pass will be most visible and hardest to ignore. The carrier holds course. That is not stubbornness. It is policy. It is legal posture. It is strategic discipline. If you turn away, you give the other side proof that their approach shaped your movement. If you speed up, you risk escalation. If you slow down, you signal hesitation. The safest move, paradoxically, is steadiness. At 06:17 a.m., the leading pair of Russian fighters begin a sharper descent, what the watch team will later describe, clinically, as a dive profile. Not a vertical plunge, not a suicidal charge, but a controlled, aggressive drop designed to compress distance and raise adrenaline without crossing a clear weapons threshold. This is the gray zone. Pressure without gunfire. In SIC, categories matter. The tracks are flagged as unsafe military approach indicators. Not hostile, that requires legal criteria. Not attack, that requires clearer action. But unsafe behavior is still behavior that can kill. And in this environment, a crash is not just a crash. It is an international incident with a nuclear shadow. At 06:18 a.m., the first jet levels briefly, then dips again, like it's testing the fence line. The second mirrors the movement, slightly offset. The remaining aircraft stay higher and wider, providing depth, watching, recording, ready to react. This is not random flying. It is choreography. At 06:19 a.m., the jets reach a range where sound becomes physical. On the flight deck, the engine whine cuts through the wind. The carrier's massive structure seems to hold the noise, reflect it, amplify it. Loose gear vibrates. Even the deck crew who pretend not to care can feel their bodies respond to the sound. The lead fighter dives again, steeper this time, and passes close enough that everyone notices the speed, the angle, the deliberate show of proximity. It doesn't have to fly directly over the deck to send the message. It only has to enter the carrier's airspace bubble close enough to force calculation inside CIC. Time to closest approach shrinks. The tactical action officer watches the geometry tighten. The air defense team continues to do what it's trained to do. Track without provoking, monitor without overreacting, hold readiness without lighting the fuse. At 06:20 a.m., the carrier group makes its first visible move. Not a turn. Not a speed change. A signal. Flight operations shift from routine readiness to launch posture. Not emergency scramble. Not panic. Controlled escalation through presence. An answer that can be seen, recorded, understood. Without firing a shot. On deck, the change is immediate, but disciplined. Crew move with purpose. Hand signals sharpen. A fighter is brought into position. Final checks happen with the calm speed of people who have done this for real before. The Russian jets dive again. This time, it's meant to catch the carrier in the moment of transition, to see if the deck crew hesitates, if the ship turns, if the group breaks rhythm. A T doesn't. At 06:21 a.m., 2 U.S. fighters launch and climb into the gray morning. They don't race straight at the Russians like something out of a movie. They take a measured intercept line, safe, professional, unmistakable. They climb to a position that offers control of geometry and visibility for cameras. They want this recorded from every angle, because what happens next won't just be judged by pilots. It will be judged by diplomats, commanders, and the public narrative. In the air, the U.S. fighters close enough to be seen, not nose-to-nose reckless. Offset. Controlled. An escort posture, not a dogfight posture. Presence without provocation. At 06:22 a.m., the Russians dive again, but now the behavior shifts. The dive is slightly wider. The leveling happens earlier. The angle is less aggressive. They've gotten the response they wanted, U.S. aircraft in the air. Now they're measuring it. How quickly? How close? How disciplined? Whether the U.S. will mirror aggression or maintain safety. The U.S. pilots hold steady. They don't need to win a duel. They need to deny the other side control of the moment. 8:06:23 a.m., the carrier transmits again on guard. Short. Firm. Professional. Russian military aircraft, you are operating in an unsafe manner in the vicinity of U.S. warships. Maintain safe separation. No response. But behavior is a form of response. One Russian jet levels off earlier, increasing lateral distance by a small but meaningful margin. Another climbs slightly, returning to a safer altitude band. Tiny moves, yet at these speeds, tiny is the difference between intimidation and tragedy. At 06:24 a.m., the Russian formation shifts into a fast pass pattern rather than a dive pattern. That distinction matters. A dive compresses reaction time and increases risk. A fast pass is still a statement, but it's easier to claim as routine flight later. The U.S. fighters remain in escort posture, matching pace, staying visible. Cameras on the carrier's island track every pass. Sensor logs capture altitude, speed, heading. Everything is preserved, because modern confrontations don't end when the jets leave. They end when the footage gets replayed in rooms far away. At 06:25 a.m., one Russian fighter executes the closest pass of the morning. It streaks across the carrier group's forward sector with speed that feels obscene at this distance. The aircraft is not overhead, but close enough that the roar punches the deck. It's the kind of pass designed to force an instinctive reaction. The carrier does not flinch. No course change. No acceleration. No visible fear. The U.S. fighters hold the line. This is the core of the encounter. Intimidation only works if it makes the target move. At 06:26 a.m., the Russian jets begin to widen their pattern. Not retreat, not surrender, repositioning. They've made their point. They've tested the boundary. They've gotten the response. Now they want to leave without triggering escalation, without getting trapped in a cycle where each side feels compelled to outdo the other. The U.S. does not chase. Chasing would turn the story into pursuit, and pursuit is a different narrative. The carrier group's doctrine is to maintain lawful transit and deny provocation. Victory in this space is measured in steadiness and records, not in dramatic domination. At 06:27 a.m., the air picture begins to clear. The radar tracks stretch outward. Range increases. Closure rate drops. The fighters climb back toward the cloud base, becoming smaller, less immediate. The sound fades from a roar into a distant whine, then into nothing but wind. The U.S. fighters remain on station a little longer, ensuring the departure is real and not a setup for a second run. Then they begin their own measured return. At 06:29 a.m., the carrier's deck shifts from intercept posture back to recovery posture. Again, no rush, no chaos. Just procedure. The first fighter approaches, lines up, lands with routine precision. The second follows. Deck crews guide them in. Chains are reattached. Covers go back on. Within minutes, the flight deck looks like it did before the sky changed. That's the point. The carrier wants the world to understand that nothing about its mission is altered by intimidation. Inside CIC, the watch team closes the loop. Radar tracks are saved. Communication transcripts are logged. Time-stamped video is archived. The tactical action officer writes a short factual timeline that includes what matters: closure rates, altitudes, distances, frequency of passes, lack of response to hails in modern competition. Documentation is deterrence after the fact. At 06:33 a.m., the carrier strike group continues forward into Greywater. No victory announcement. No celebration. Professional forces don't celebrate the absence of catastrophe. They simply return to the routine that prevented catastrophe in the first place. But every sailor who was awake for it understands what happened. Russian fighters attempted to apply pressure through risk and proximity. They tried to create a moment where the carrier group would either overreact, providing propaganda, or yield, providing precedent. Instead, the U.S. answered with controlled escalation, launching fighters, establishing safe intercept geometry, maintaining lawful posture, and documenting everything. No missiles fired. No flares. No targeting locks broadcast for theater. Just discipline. And discipline is the one thing intimidation cannot easily defeat. Because the most dangerous weapon in encounters like this isn't a bomb, it's miscalculation. A wingtip too close. A dive too steep, a pilot too aggressive, a commander too emotional. This time, none of those errors happened. Not because the sky was friendly, because procedure held. 8:06:36 a.m., the last radar return of the Russian jets fades beyond the carrier group's monitored sector. The air picture returns to routine. Civilian tracks remain. The sea looks unchanged. The horizon is still a gray line. To anyone watching from far away, it would appear that nothing happened, but inside the carrier's operational spaces, the event continues in analysis. Experts will replay the telemetry. They'll measure angles and altitudes. They'll classify patterns. They'll compare it to previous encounters. They'll ask what it signaled, what it tested, and what it revealed. Because that is what modern confrontation has become. A contest of thresholds, recorded in data, shaped by restraint, and decided by who controls the moment when neither side wants to be the first to cross the line. The Russian jets came to dive. To intimidate, to force a reaction. What happened instead is that the carrier strike group demonstrated something quieter, but harder to challenge. It will not be shaped. It will not panic. And it will not surrender control of its mission to someone else's risky choreography. The sea remains gray. The carrier moves on. The jets are gone. But the lesson is recorded. In the modern battlefield, dominance is not always loud. Sometimes it's the ability to hold steady, while someone else tries to turn your calm into chaos, and fails.